iHeart radio station.
Quiet, numbskulls. I'm broadcasting.
Hey, what's happening?
Brother, what's up?
This is a groovy party, man.
Yeah,
I
brother,
can dig it.
stop. Right on.
I don't know, show of hands.
Mother, there's too many of you crying.
I don't know, show of hands.
Brother,
Show of hands.
there's far too many of you dying.
I think anyone
I guess not,
who puckers up their lips and presses it against their boss's buttocks and then smooches is an ass kisser.
He's a font of misplaced rage. Name your cliche. Mother held him too much or not enough. Last picked at kickball, late night sneaky uncle, whatever. Now he's so angry. Moments of levity actually cause him pain. Gives him headaches. Happiness for that gentleman hurts.
Good luck.
All I'm asking is for you to just have the tiniest bit of vision. You know, to step back for 1 minute and look at the big picture. To take a chance on something that just might end up being the most profoundly impactful moment for humanity, for the history of history.
You're just absolutely right. And I'm absolutely wrong. It must be nice to always believe you know better.
I don't know, show of hands.
To always think you're the smartest person in the room.
Exception leader fan Radio Network.
Okay.
And KFAN. That's KFAN.com. 2 minutes, 15 seconds past 3 o'clock Central Daylight Time. Welcome back. Monday production of the Bumper to Bumper Show on a beautiful afternoon here in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. Guardsy produces the show. He is in his usual Studio B location. I'm in Studio A. My name is Dan Barrero. I'm the ringmaster for this always combustible, occasionally controversial circus that we do indeed call, since the beginning, the Bumper to Bumper program. See, afternoon drive, Bumper to Bumper traffic.
Oh.
We decided to put those things two together, even though they may not even exist post-COVID in the way they did pre-COVID.
Not on Mondays.
But I think at this late date, it's a little difficult. Feel tough to change the name of the show. Right? I mean, I guess we could...
I don't think so.
Would that be a good way to freshen it up? Just literally change the name of the program?
Other stations have done it.
Have they?
Just change the name. Yeah. I mean, last week you wanted to change the original open and maybe add something in from 20 plus years ago.
Right.
Maybe this is a time to take a fresh look at everything.
Okay. Hit the Bradshaw and Brian KFAN text line. It's open.
I don't know what we would call it. I have no...
64686. Well, that's the
I'm
beauty
sure
of
others,
our audience.
Others would have names.
They'll have names. Some will be snarky.
Most, I think.
Some will be controversial. Some might be apt. If it's complimentary, you have a better chance for it to be read.
Most likely.
Not going to lie to you.
Yep.
But I might throw in a little bit of snark as well. We'll give you the Abort and Volvo guest lineup in just a couple of minutes and encourage you to hit the text line or the email address, which is booth, BOOTHKFAN.com, or the listen line, which we probably do not use enough. We'll try to encourage that as well. I mentioned off the top of the program that we are indeed the Bud Grant exception leader. It's interesting because been a lot of talk about Bud this weekend, given yesterday was the big public memorial, the first chance the public had in that sort of setting to salute the late, great Minnesota Vikings legendary coach. I was honored to be a part of the festivities yesterday. Thought it was very well put together, very well produced, very well hosted. Kudos to Bobby Hagan, Tom West, and others who I think did it right and didn't go on and on and on. Got in, got out inside of 2 hours, which I think was the ultimate salute to Bud, who would have said, it's too nice a day. Don't make this go on till 4:30 with everybody obsessing over me, crying over me, etc. Very well done. Very tasteful, entertaining event, I think, from start to finish, and I was very glad to be there for it. But I had spent, up until then, part of the weekend thinking a lot about a piece that I don't remember who brought this piece to my attention. And ostensibly, it's a statement about the National Basketball Association coaching carousel. I think it actually touches on a deeper issue that transcends all sports. But the writer, Joe Varden, made it, that's his specialty, so he made it about basketball. The headline, Doc Rivers' 76ers firing emblematic of deeper NBA problem with coaching carousel. And he mentions that, Rivers quickly fired after the Sixers didn't make it to the conference finals again. He notes that of the last 5 coaches to win the finals, 4 have since been fired. That includes, is it Tyronn Lue, Frank Vogel, Mike Budenholzer, and, of course, Doc Rivers. And it's a really thoughtful piece that attempts to drill deep to confirm what some might say is the obvious, but is still, I think, important. He notes that the NBA is down to 3 untouchable coaches. They are Greg Popovich in San Antonio, 27 consecutive seasons. Eric Spoelstra in Miami, 15 consecutive seasons. And Steve Kerr, Golden State, with 9 seasons. And he writes, there are only 3 markets in the NBA where any player, those 3 we just named, where those 3 coaches toil, where any player who comes through knows that their ego, their will, and their personal desires will not be enough to topple a coach. KD and Draymond Green aren't too big for Kerr. Jimmy Butler isn't above Spoelstra in Miami. And Kawhi Leonard was not more important than Pop in San Antonio, Davey. The rest of the league isn't like that, he writes, and look at the instability. Look at what happened in Brooklyn, where Kyrie Irving and Durant ran roughshod over an organization that was built to win titles. Consider James Harden, who has forced his way out of Houston and Brooklyn, and now in Philadelphia, characterized his relationship with Rivers as just okay. Not long before Rivers was fired. Think about every market, he writes. Milwaukee, Cleveland, Memphis, New Orleans, Dallas, where organizations are terrified that their star player may grow unhappy and demand a trade before his contract is up. He might as well have included the Minnesota Timberwolves. The only reason he didn't is he probably doesn't think we're relevant enough to even be part of the conversation. But the same lesson applies, you could argue here, even more so, that we are so terrified. And he opines that he doesn't believe that it's a great way to run a business. And we've talked about it as it pertains to the Miami Heat, that even before their most recent success, on the verge now of sweeping the Boston Celtics. Nothing's going to happen to the coach. Unless Pat Riley thinks it's time to have something happen to the coach. You know who found that out early? Guy by the name of LeBron James. He said, no, that's not why we do it here.
He's the coach.
We like you, and we want talent. It's not like we don't understand there's a need for talent. But the moral of the story is it allows people to talk about this thing called heat culture. It gets overdrawn and overblown and oversimplified. But it is crucial, and that's why we've talked about it as much as I've said how many times, I want what they've got. And at the very core, that's what they have. They have a pecking order and people in charge. And what the story indicates is just now how rare this is in the National Basketball Association. If you're down to 3 places where this is the case. And it got me to thinking and broadening it out. How many NFL franchises have the same sort of, I guess you could say, set of conditions? NHL, NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball, where it doesn't seem to matter as much if the players start getting antsy or start talking about a new voice. In those locations, you could certainly say that's been the case in New England, right, with Bill Belichick. Maybe he is a little vulnerable now, according to Bob Kraft. I don't know, but he hasn't been, right? It's been about him. Who's the head coach in Pittsburgh? We used to have him as a...
Mike Tomlin.
Mike Tomlin.
And I think he's the third head coach in Steelers history.
And he fits the bill.
And they've been around forever.
They say Tomlin's coaching. You'll have to adjust to that, or if you can't adjust to that, we'll figure something else out. But we'll decide, but we're not going to do what everybody else seems to think they have to do to placate. In some cases, need a new voice. Players are wired differently today. And as I'm listening to a number of dignitaries yesterday at the People's Stadium, downtown Minneapolis, ode Bud Grant, I'm thinking to myself, he represents or represented that exception. We had that. Bud Grant was not going to be fired here. I don't care how many Super Bowls he lost, right? Bud Grant was going to leave when he wanted to leave, and he did once, and then he had to come back after the Steckel disaster, and then he came back to stabilize things for 1 year, then they turned it over to Bernsey, and that was it. But to that extent, we're reminded of the rarefied air that coaches like that represent. Now, you could say the sticky little wicket here is it's much harder to apply the hammer without a track record of success. Pop's track record, ridiculous, right? Golden State's track record, semi-ridiculous. And who's the third we said that's untouchable in the NBA? Spo. Very good with an owner, with a general manager / president of basketball operations, Pat Riley, who's all of himself royalty, right? Great success, winning championships, and success in New York as well. And that's, you could say, the catch-22 of it. It's harder to use that hammer and adhere to that philosophy that, no, we're not changing coaches to placate one ego or two egos. We're not letting them run it. It's hard to use that hammer without success. And yet it's probably, we're learning, less likely to have success without the hammer. How do we get out of that? What do we make of it? And who are the other coaches in the various sports who have that kind of gravitas? They're just not messed with. Give that some thought via the Bradshaw and Bryan KFAN text line. We give Guardsy a chance to get it on this subject, and we will set up the Borton Volvo guest lineup for the rest of a very busy show.
KFAN, The Fan.
Thursday, June 1st, get ready for the first ever iHeartRadio Access Day, where we give you access like never before. The biggest deals from national and local brands you love, along with awesome experiences like spending a day with Dan Patrick and the Danettes in the Man Cave. Wow. Register to get reminders when experiences go live Thursday, June 1st. Go to iHeartRadioAccessDay.com, iHeartRadioAccessDay.com.
Fell from the sky. I tried to catch your eye in the rubber sky.
Some alternative names for the program have indeed come in. Super Sci-Fi Guy suggests the Positive Spin with Dan Barrero on the Fan. Positive Spin. If you find yourself eastbound on 494 at France Avenue, bumper to bumper aptly applies.
That's still one of the spots.
It is. Do we know why?
I mean, essentially because 35 is entering
okay.
494 right there.
Yeah.
You've got traffic coming from the east, traffic coming from the west.
Bluster and bloviation with Barrero.
It's a little wordy.
He wanted to work hard for the alliteration,
Which we love.
which we do love, and he knows that, so he thought he would try it. I have a great way to change up the show, Dan. You retire, and JG, you take over. Perfect. That's Roofer Guy.
We'd probably change the name if that happened.
I'm sorry to disappoint you, Roofer Guy. I mean, I'll be, done eventually. But it ain't going to happen today, I don't think. Bumped in the first round for a show name? How about bumped in the first round? Get it?
That would be apt. Yeah.
Bummer to bummer program. Hi-Fi and the Pup.
It's a long-time listener.
Oh, my God.
Appreciate the loyalty there.
How about the Amateur State of Hockey afternoon show? We'll take others under advisement. So I'm reading from this very well-reasoned athletic piece that I think should be required reading for every owner, not just in the NBA, frankly. It's intended for the NBA. And it's going to come off as, boy, you want to go back to those dictatorial days when players had no say. Coaches ruled with an iron fist. Not really. But here's what I am ready to say as I continue to watch the Heat do what they've done and the ridiculousness of as many coaches only a couple years removed from winning titles being fired in large measure, again, because of the feeling that some players don't want them there. Or it could be in Phoenix, for example, a new owner who wants to do the old, I got to put my cliched stamp on it.
Yep.
But I don't, you will recall this well. The number of people who participated in the character assassination of Thibodeau when he was here.
Yeah.
All basically saying, joyless, not any fun. Players just, they can't, they don't rally around it. They want to rally around it.
Plays a lot of minutes.
Exactly. I officially don't ever want to hear that crap. I'm not going to listen to that crap anymore. That's the Miami Heat lesson for me is I'm not going to listen to it. Now, if there's a coach obviously abusing players or looks so incompetent from an X's and O standpoint, I get it. But the lesson that's being offered in this piece, a lot of people in our business need to read, to be honest with you. This notion that I've lost the players. So-and-so's lost the players. Or this player, he'll leave if we do not kowtow to everything that he wants. What has it gotten the Minnesota Timberwolves? What has it gotten most of the teams that he mentions there? Not much. And again, I get it's always easier to be tough guy when you got the Pat Riley pedigree, the Popovich pedigree. That's the catch-22 part. It cannot be denied. But I still think the lesson is, how did that go in Brooklyn?
Right.
Basically turning over the franchise to 3 heavyweight names, right? How'd that work? How does it work almost anywhere that you do it? Not very. So I don't want to hear about it anymore. I don't want to hear about the players are tuning him out. That's another part of the reason why I'm rooting as hard as I am for the Heat, who are not devoid of talent. Talent's part of this thing, but it is remarkable to see what I think is possible if you're willing to stay the course and not constantly make changes. The problem here, of course, is, do we know we have the right guy to turn it over to for, 30 years a la Bud Grant, right? Or a la the Pat Riley regime or Spo, whatever. That's the difficult part. You got to get the right guy first.
Right.
And that's hard to figure out. But I just thought it was an impressive piece, and it was a good reminder. And it did bring me back to the Bud thing yesterday. There was... I've talked to a lot of people about over the years. I don't even think there was ever a question, ever, even as they're losing 4 Super Bowls, that, I don't know, might need a new voice, give someone else a chance.
They haven't scored in the first half.
Well, that's it.
Does he have them ready? We
had that kind of guy. That's exactly what it had here. And you know what it forced players to do? Figure it out. It forced players to figure out we're not going to be able to mutiny here. We're not going to be able to, and it's always easier in the NBA because there's fewer players, obviously, and there's superstar players. One player makes a lot of difference. But it's, I think, such an important lesson, especially when you have, and by the way, you can look at each of those NBA coaches who just won world championships in the last 5 years and give very legitimate reasons why they haven't won another one. You know what I'm saying? It's not like you go, well, they completely started mailing it in after that. I mean, what happened in Toronto to Nurse? Kawhi left.
Right. Yes.
Go down the list. Each of those, even with Doc Rivers' case, you said, well, he hadn't gotten Philly any further, but that's sort of what they've been. Have the Clippers been any better since Doc left? Not really.
With Kawhi, by the way, on the team.
Right.
Ironically enough.
So I loved the way he wrote it, and I hope, because I think that, the pendulum always is swinging one way or the other, and I think in some ways it's swung. For a lot of us in this business, it's, well, we may not like it, but we just have to understand it's a different world, and we got to get a new voice, et cetera, et cetera. And I think he's saying, is it too glib to say that? Is it too easy just to go down that road without actually examining the absurdity of all these head coaches who are going to get more jobs probably?
Yeah, they're on the hamster wheel.
Fired so quickly after they just won a title.
Because it's not like, Pat Riley won the title with Wade and Shaq, right? And then he handed it off to Spo. And then Spo lost in the finals that first year.
Right.
And that story I sent you the other day, he essentially slept in the office that night. He was so bitter about it with one of the assistants and said, this can't happen again. We blew it. It's not LeBron's fault. Let's figure it out. And then obviously they won a couple. They didn't win. They haven't won a title since LeBron left,
they have
right?
Not. You're right.
But they've been in the mix enough to be one of the teams with an opportunity. They went to the finals in the bubble. That looks like they're going to the finals now. Like these coaches, if you just want to specify it or dumb it down to the NBA guys, none of these guys were ever allowed to get the Pop pedigree or the Belichick pedigree or even the Spo pedigree because they weren't even given a year or two.
Or the Bud Grant pedigree.
After all of that. Yep. It's very strange. It's very strange.
Texts are coming in. I give you the Borton Valvo guest lineup. It will include Russo Radio, who actually wants to speak to this subject, especially as it pertains to the hockey world and his own experiences covering the Miami Heat and covering Pat Riley and Spo. We originally thought Johnny was going to be with us. He's got some stuff that's come up. So it will be Russo Radio today at 4:30 to talk not just this issue.
3 KFAN.
The Fan and Busch Light bring you Fan on the Farm. All this month, PA is taking your tractor talkbacks, and each day one farmer is chosen to receive a Busch Light prize pack and $150 to restock your fridge with Busch Light, a proud supporter of the farming community. Busch Light, crack a cold one.
When I was just a little girl.
I don't know which Miami Heat player I heard quoted talking about. It might have been, who's the big man? What's the name of their big man?
Bam Adebayo?
Who's highly underrated. He can run the damn offense. Now, he's not Joker level run it as a big man, but he's close. He's a nice piece. A very nice player. Anyway, may have been him basically saying, it may have been with the TNT crew, basically saying, we work, man. There's just never any negotiation about that's the way we're going after it. He's talking about practice, not just talking about the game. And, it's no secret that if, in the case of the Miami Heat, for example, you do not abide by that or you can't handle that, you're out. They'll find somebody else. They don't negotiate much on that. I'm sure if it's a talented player, they'll give more rope, but you know the deal. That's the approach they take. And contrast that. This is an example of good reporting, but a kind of reporting that almost seems to enable the problem. Let me take you back to going into Game 2, Lakers, Nuggets. We talked about this. Lakers' second half adjustments allowed them to have a shot at Game 1. Now the question is what adjustments they'll make going into Game 2. To which one of the Lakers reporters said, on the Lakers potentially bringing D'Angelo Russell off the bench, multiple team sources told ESPN that there is concern the team could quote-unquote lose the 27-year-old point guard if he views the adjustment as a demotion after starting every other game this postseason.
Are you nuts?
That's the problem in a nutshell. That's it. Game, set, match. The fact that in a real-world sense, too many teams say, well, this is what we got to deal with. We might lose them. We don't love it, but we can't lose them. We might if this is what we do. In Miami, they laugh at that. They go, bye. Go ahead, get lost. We'll find somebody else who will at least, might not win for us, but will compete. But it's now too often that kind of reporting is a given that got to factor it in. You might lose, and the irony, of course, is you're losing a situational player who's up and he's down and he's inconsistent and he's almost now become non-existent. He's become probably too much of the whipping boy in L.A. now. He's played dreadfully in this series, but he's not the only Lakers problem. But the fact that we have to have that reporters, have to lay it out as multiple team sources. They might lose him. They might lose D'Angelo Russell. And you say, if we're going to go down the road of losing people at all and accept that that's just the price of doing business in 2023, a price that some teams will not pay, Miami included, then you're kind of defeated to a certain extent. You are asking to repeat many of the same mistakes that so many franchises do in their fear of pissing off a player or, quote-unquote, losing a player. It's almost laughable when you think about it. Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line is 64686. So you mentioned, in football, it's Belichick and it's
Tomlin, essentially.
Tomlin.
It was Sean Payton, too.
It was. But right now, is there anybody else? I don't think so. Are we forgetting somebody?
No, I'm trying to go through the divisions a little bit.
Pete Carroll would be the closest.
Yeah, we got there at the same time.
We finally got there.
I got West. Pete Carroll.
Pete Carroll.
Probably Kyle Shanahan. He's been in San Fran for a while.
Yeah, pretty close. And you get the sense that Lynch, you get the sense that they kind of...
There's some Ubuntu going on.
We're in charge. Yep. We know what we're doing here.
Yep.
And being in charge doesn't mean, abusing players. I'll say it again.
No, but you have a system, you have a culture, yes. You have things set up.
You have because I heard my guy Scal again. He and Frank Isola were talking about this morning, and they're kind of mocking the whole heat culture thing because they think it is as simple as it's Pat Riley. But then Scal made a comment where he said, people talk about this culture all the time. Well, if it was just culture, and he started naming 2 or 3 players that they got rid of. And I'm yelling into the ether, no, Scal, that proves the point of the culture. That if they identify a guy who doesn't get it, then they're not going to keep going, well, we might lose him if we come down too hard on him. They say, we'll have to go someplace else because it's just not going to work here. That defines to me, beyond the glib nature of just the term, the cliched term culture, that is culture. If other teams are loath to do that or hesitate more to do that because they go, we need the talent, man. No, we don't want to be identified as being too autocratic. I think Pat Riley worries about that. Now, again, Pat Riley is, an NBA champion, had great success in L.A., redefined the New York Knicks. They never won it, right, there, but he made them viable for sure. and then has won titles in Miami as well. And that's, Andy Reid would be another good one, I think.
Yep.
Don't you think?
Andy Reid's a good one.
Andy Reid's got to be a good one.
Yep.
And I know this is apropos to hockey because Louie and I have talked about it some. We're going to talk about it in more depth with Russo at the bottom of the 4 o'clock hour. John Harbaugh?
Yeah.
Pretty close, probably.
He's been in Baltimore for a long time.
Is it? Do you think it's? I think in general. So we already have named a few more in football, or have we? We've got
that's
Belly,
about 5,
5 or 6,
5 or 6.
So double what you have in the NBA, and I think that also speaks to the fact that too many people have just surrendered to the notion that one player can change everything for us in basketball. Therefore, we're going to be prisoner to making sure that that player loves us, no matter whether we're sending the right messages to him to get to the place where he can be the best he can be, and therefore we can be the best we can be.
It's also set up separately because of how, the NBA, we're seeing it a little bit with franchise players moving teams recently. And when I say franchise players for the NFL, I'm mostly talking about quarterbacks, right? Where we did the bit a couple of years ago, the carousel. It seemed like high-profile quarterbacks were going all over the place, whether it was A-Raj this year or
That's
Tom
true,
Brady
yes.
a couple of years ago, Russell Wilson. It seemed like guys, Matt Stafford got traded. It seemed like those guys were moving. I mean, really starting with LeBron going to Miami, ironically enough, that kind of started the whole player empowerment super team era where players started to say, you know what, I'm done here. I mean, Anthony Davis basically told New Orleans, I'm not going to play here anymore. So figure it out. And because you need...
Well, and you know who does a lot of the enabling? Again, media jackals.
Yeah.
Because they go, he's being wasted there. It's time. Or because people like the speculation of getting him to a one of the sexy franchises. Everybody kind of goes, yeah, well, that's the way it works. That's just the way it's going to be. Now, in the case of KG, I think you could say that's a notable exception where you go, you can't even blame. They in that case had to talk him into it, if you recall, but it made sense to say, yeah, it's probably time because otherwise he's never going to get a chance to win a ring. But I think it's just become too much a staple of, it's part of player empowerment. Hell yes.
What it is now.
And I think you can broaden it out. It does. A texter guy writes, change in society, the instant gratification bit, which we've talked about. I think that is a part too. I do. I think, hell, college coaches are dealing with it. And I'm not going to get on a high horse that players shouldn't have freedom because coaches certainly do. But I think it's undeniable that it makes it, in some cases for some players, some college players, too easy to face their fears, accept criticism that might be coming their way, that might, ultimately, make them better. I heard Sam Mitchell ranting about this. And Sam Mitchell is got a foot in both worlds. He's old school in some ways, but he also understands that you got to make some adjustments. He's coached in this league. He knows that. And he's coached young players and had a good relationship with some of those players. But I've heard him rant on this very subject that in effect, he's saying, I keep being told that Miami's the only place that can really do this as purely as they have. And he's yelling, why? Why? Why do we sort of enable or feed this notion that just too hard to do? Because he thinks it is doable. It's a matter of just committing to it. And that goes back to ownership, right? And goes back to whoever is running your basketball operation. And, hopefully not investing too long in somebody who is flat out incapable of doing the job. That's the bit, right? That's where it gets difficult.
And you have to figure out what's the level of success you're willing to live with to build off of.
Great point, yes.
Because not every team's going to win a championship. I mean, we just brought it up. Spo has not won one without LeBron and D. Wade. Pat Riley, without Magic Johnson and or D. Wade, right?
Yes.
I mean, but are you cool with many of the years being in the mix, getting to the conference semifinals, getting to the conference finals, winning 40 to 50 games a year? Yeah, sometimes people get tired of that too.
Yeah, that's all true. I mean, it even goes to, it's all related to the trend, which is training camp is now so short and practices are so limited that, and even some players will have acknowledged this, I think Paul George included, that you can't really even establish any meaningful continuity in terms of what are you trying to do? What do you want to do? What are we attempting to do? You almost have to do it on the fly. And we'll start the season and we'll kind of figure the thing out. And in the end, lots of teams end up losing and have difficulty in the middle of a season figuring out even what exactly they want to be. Now, there are franchises that I think are even in a more vulnerable state than some that I named, like that Joe Varden named in his piece, including, the Dallas Mavericks and a couple of others. And historically, we're at the top of that list because we view ourselves, we believe we're flyover country. We think nobody likes us. And therefore, we feel like we live in constant fear of, well, what if Cat wants to go? What if Ant wants to go?
We're already worried about Ant wanting out.
What if he wants out?
Mm-hmm.
And on the one hand, you say, well, that's understandable. On the other hand, because you're saying, well, here, we're not going to be able to go out and get any of the talent. We were able to draft him, so we're terrified. But all it ends up doing, I think, is working against having the greatest chance to get the best out of what those players indeed represent. And as you say, you got to stay with Spoelstra, right? I mean, you got to, and the stories were legendary. LeBron gets there, and I think they basically played 500 for an early part, like a quarter of the season, something like that. And those are the rumors, right? That he's setting it up. He's going to bring in who he wants. And they say a lot of stuff changed when it became clear. I don't know if it was specifically said directly to LeBron or indirectly. No, Spoelstra's going to be the coach. Because even then it was, you got to get a bigger name. Right. It's LeBron.
You got to get a guy that's going to handle LeBron.
Name, knows how, and who instant respect and all that. And to Riley's credit, he clearly felt, no, I know this guy. I know what he can do. He can coach. And now what's ironic is he's probably viewed, and this is recency bias, but he's probably right now viewed as the best coach in the league.
He is. Yes.
And I understand why. Yep. I really do. Even listening to him last night, I happened to listen to the postgame. And it's not like he gives everything away, but there's just a lot of really, I don't remember which of the role players he was talking about. Who was the kid who had 27 points last night? Whoever had almost 30. He basically said, yeah, he was really good. He said, but guess what? In game, I think he said it was 2. He had 4 points.
Yeah.
And
I think in the playing game, he had
good.
0.
He was
that Martin?
Martin.
Yeah.
Who I really like, by the way. But regardless, his point was, the way we want to do things is we don't evaluate just on the box. We evaluate on what are we getting in a certain situation that we need. And last night it was more scoring, and he gave us that. Other times it's going to be something very different. So obviously I got to believe in a position now where he'll coach as long as he wants to. And he still looks like he's like 22 years old.
He looks like the video intern.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, and when he was a video intern, they were actually VHS tapes. I mean, that's how far back it goes. And we've talked about this when it comes to the Wild, because they've obviously had a couple of situations where they've had players just flat out quit on the coach, Mike Yeo in particular.
We did talk about that. You're right.
And being in the building the day that Mike Yeo got fired, that forever scarred me. Where nothing is as repulsive to me as when a team just flat out quits on a guy. And I know that I've never played professional sports, and like a guy like Mark Parrish or Ben Lieber will tell you, well, it's easy for, if you haven't been in the room, right. And everybody's human and these things happen. It's a business, all of that. But to just watch a team flat out lie down and give no effort, essentially forcing the hand of the GM to say, I got to do something because these guys aren't playing. I've never been more disgusted in my life than I was that Saturday. And I'll never forget, because I had a cake show the next day. It was a Saturday afternoon where I'm in the crowd, and I just can't believe I'm watching this happen. And so it always bothers me when, even last night, the Celtics looked like they just flat out laid down. And their coaching situation is so messed up because, they had Ime who got
they didn't
fired.
Intend to make a change, right?
And the guy who should have taken over for him took the Utah job, Will Hardy. So they were left. I mean, they're calling this poor guy second row Joe because last year Joe Mazzulla was on the second row of the bench. Wasn't even like a real coach. And so this 34-year-old gets thrown into this mess. And obviously he's probably not going to survive this. He'll probably coach again somewhere else. He's 34 years old. But to watch players just flat out quit on a guy because they know they can, which in these sports with guaranteed contracts and all these things, that's probably one thing football has for it as well.
Yeah.
Nothing drives me crazier than that in the sports world.
It's letting the terrorists win. It's a sports version of letting the terrorists win, and it conveys most of the time, not always, but most of the time, the worst message. And so you'd like to think sooner or later, the message offered up via that story in The Athletic we've been quoting from for this first hour would get through the skulls of folks who run other teams, but it doesn't seem to. I mean, this, if it has any chance to get through, you'd like to think this might be the year, the longer Miami is able to sustain this. Because this feels like something different. Now, again, Miami made a good run last year. It's basically the same team. They just had a weirder regular season and came in as the 8th seed and seemed to be nowhere, near ready to make this kind of run. And it all gets oversimplified. They're not the only team to, get B and C level pedigree talent and turn it into something, the way we've talked about it with them. But nobody's doing it at a higher level than they are right now. And so, you'd hope it matters, but my gut tells me it won't. I still think too many of the folks who run these teams aren't strong enough. They don't have the fiber to do it. And to a certain extent, you can also argue that they're a little bit screwed about playing that, bringing the hammer down, because what has happened is we've talked about this before. If you convey over a period of time the message to players that you're right, man, you're in charge, in effect, and what can we do for you? What can we do to make you smile? Because we don't want you to frown much. Tibbs made you frown too much. What can we do to make you smile a little bit more? They start to believe it. And then I think it does become harder to coach them. If they become wired that way, if the trend at almost every level is that's the way you go about the business of dealing with these players, as opposed to, challenging all of them. Pop obviously was known for that. You could say it's easier to do it when you got the talent he did. David Robinson, Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, etc., Tony Parker. And even, Miami's got Jimmy Butler's a great talent, but everybody seems to say those guys will be coached. They might argue, they might fight it, but they'll eventually they'll accept the idea that they're not getting rid of the coach. No matter what I do, they're not going to do so.
Closest thing we have locally would probably be Cheryl Reeve.
Cheryl Reeve, it's been suggested, yes, that's true.
And she's got the title equity, and now she's the general manager as well.
Yes.
And we'll see. I mean, I know they're trying to rebuild it now officially.
Yes.
Getting Nafisa Collier back and obviously having Diamond Miller now the second overall pick. And we'll see. I mean, the test is going to be if they have another couple of years like the ones that they've just had, right?
Or are we in tanking mode? I'm just asking. I'm not alleging it. I'm asking, are we in responsible tanking mode this year?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I think they're trying to surprise people this year.
Should we be?
You want Paige Beckers?
I'm just saying. Well, she's going to sit. She's going to sit another year, isn't she?
I think she's got another year after this. Yeah.
What about the Iowa kid?
Caitlin Clark.
She's coming, right?
I mean, technically, she could go back to Iowa for another year after this one.
Yeah.
And she is doing very well in name, image, and likeness, from what I hear.
That wouldn't surprise me.
Like, Hy-Vee's paying her a lot of money to be at Iowa. We'll see if that continued if she was
Does she like the college life enough to say, yeah, I'm in no hurry?
I mean, I think once you get to her age, I mean, you're taking maybe
she's
one or two online classes.
25 years old now or 26?
No, I don't mean, but she's
kidding.
Yeah, she's a legit senior.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah,
we'll see if she comes out.
Well, if you're going to even responsibly attempt to tank, you sort of need to know.
Need to make sure who's coming out.
Because if they're not coming out, then you're back to. Do they do a lottery? I don't even remember.
Yes,
WNBA does do. That's right.
But it's
more weight. It's like
it's different. It takes in not just the year
That's right.
before,
That's right.
but like the year before the year before. It's more of an aggregate. So
the
you
idea
can't
there
just
is to
tank.
discourage even responsible tanking for a single season.
Well, and the crazy thing about the WNBA is, like, if you're a first-round pick, there's no guarantee you make the team that you get drafted to because they only have so many teams. That's the big controversy in the W right now is they want to expand teams because a lot of good players are getting cut. Like, first-round draft picks are getting cut or, a year or two later, they're out. They're just out of the league because there's not a lot of jobs at the moment.
Russo Radio, he will join us at 4:30. I do want to talk some Wild with him, and we'll get back into this particular subject because there's a lot of moving around of NHL